Good morning, everyone. Parak Chas Mishna Beis. So yesterday's Mishnah was talking about a situation where, let's say, a woman or a slave were eating truma, had eaten truma, and they found out that they were no more permitted to do so. Or a case where a Kohen found out that he was either a cholol or blemished. Or he found out that he was a cholol. He had eaten truma, assuming that he was a Kohen, and then he found out he was a cholol. And the Mishnah spoke about, the question about what the liability is. Do you have to pay the Karen and the principal and the fifth or not? We're continuing with those scenarios, but a little bit differently, and that is v'chulam in all cases that we mentioned before. PM, where the truma was in their mouth. That means the woman had, or the slave had the truma in their mouth, and they were told, you can't eat truma anymore. Or, they told the wife, Mace Bailach, your husband died, but she's got the truma in her mouth. She started eating it. The slave was told, you were sold to a non-Kohen. He's got the truma in his mouth. So now they have truma in their mouth, and they're not allowed to eat, and they're being told they're not allowed to eat it. Rabbi Eliezer Oimer Yivlu. Rabbi Eliezer says, finish what's in your mouth, swallow it. Rabbi Shua Oimer Yivloitu. Rabbi Shua says you have to spit it out. Now, according to Rabbi Shua, that's very well understood why to spit it out. Not to eat it anymore. What's the explanation to Rabbi Eliezer that says you swallow it? Rabbi Eliezer says is that since when you began eating this, you were permitted to eat it. Meaning, okay, I'm sorry, let me clarify something. The case here is that let's say we're not talking about that they found that a few days before. That's not the case here. I just realized that. The case here is that they were told, meaning while the truma is in their mouth, she said, right now, you just became divorced. Right now, your husband just died. Right now, your master just sold you to a non-Kohen. That's the case. The change of the status, the change of their permissibility of eating truma transpires while they're in the middle of eating. That's when it happens. Okay? Therefore, Rabbi Eliezer says, being that when you started eating, you were allowed. So therefore the halacha is that that you can continue, just finish eating what's in your mouth. You started beheter, you started permissibly, you can finish it. Rabbi Yeshua says no. Once the point comes that you're not allowed to eat it anymore, you have to spit it out. And therefore, being that that's the explanation, the commentaries point out that the word v'chulam in all of them, meaning which would sound like all the cases mentioned before, is not so. Because in the case of the woman whose husband died or divorced her, or the slave no more belongs to this Kohen master, that could happen while they're eating. But one of the cases before was that he found that he was a cholol. That means he was never able to eat. So you can never make an argument to say, well, you started permissively. You didn't. You thought you were doing it permissibly, but actually you weren't. And therefore, this argument, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, as to whether you can actually finish eating what you started eating permissibly or not, that's only going to be in the case of where the woman was divorced or widowed, or the slave changed ownership, but not in the case of the cholol, where he was always, or where he was never permitted to be eating this truma. There, Rabbi Eliezer would agree you have to spit it out. Okay, so that's the first case of the Mishnah. The next case continues. Amrulai, they said to a Kohen, Nitmeisa v'nitmeis truma. This Kohen has truma in his mouth, and they told him, you have become tamei right now. You didn't realize it, but you just became tamei. A dead sheretz somehow or another hit you, landed on you, touched you, whatever it may be. He started eating the truma was in his mouth, and he started eating the heter permissibly, and they told him, you have just become tamei. Or somehow the food in your mouth just became tamei. I'm not sure exactly what the case of that is. Maybe again, some kind of dead sheretz fell into his mouth and he didn't realize it and it touched the food. Whatever the case is, they're telling him right now, while the food is in your mouth, the food has become tamei. The truma has become tamei. We're talking about truma here. Kohen's eating truma. If the kohen is tamei, he may not eat truma. If the truma becomes tamei, the kohen may not eat it. So in both these cases, after it was ready in his mouth, either he became tamei or the food became tamei. So again, Rebbe Lezer Omer Yivla, Rebbe Lezer says you could swallow it. You started permissibly, you can finish what's in your mouth. Rebbe Yeshua Omer Yifleit, Rebbe Yeshua says, no, you got to spit it out. The next case is Tamei Hayisa. They tell the Kohen, you were tamei from before. Utamei Hayisa Truma. This tamei was tamei. This truma was tamei. Meaning, he's eating, but he was tamei already from beforehand. Or the truma was already tamei from beforehand. He didn't know, but he was told. Okay, or we have different cases now. Or let's say it became known what the person is eating is tevel. So he's not talking about a kohen. He's talking about a non-kohen. He's eating the grain. He thought that the trimus and the maestris and everything were separated. He didn't know it was tevel, and they told him, this is tevel. Or it's ma'aser rishon that the truma wasn't taken. Ma'aser rishon is after you have your grain, you give part to the kohen. What's left, you give a tenth to the Levi. The Levi has to give a tenth from his tenth to the Kohen. Until the tenth of his tenth is given to the Kohen, that meiser is tevel. The Levi may not eat it, and if the Levi gives it to someone else to eat, which he's allowed to, that person can't eat it until the trumas meiser, the tenth of a tenth, is separated to give to the Kohen. Okay, so he's eating meiser rishon, and he finds out the truma was never separated. Umeiser sheni vehekta shalei niftu. Or we're talking about the second meiser or consecrated grain, sanctified grain that was not redeemed. Meiser sheni is the second tenth after the tenth is given to the Levi. You take there's a second tenth. 4 out of the 6 years of the agricultural cycle, the meiser second tenth is called meiser sheni second tenth, and it's sanctified. Got to eat in Yerushalayim or redeem it onto money. That the money is spent in Yerushalayim on food, and then you can eat your produce outside of Yerushalayim. Or let's say you consecrated the produce, and if you redeem it and give the money to the Beis HaMikdash, you can eat the produce, otherwise you can't. So now a person ate meiser sheni, or a consecrated grain that he thought was redeemed. He thought the sanctity was removed, and it wasn't. Right? So in all these cases right now, we have cases where there was never a permissibility to eat it. And now we have the final case. Or he tasted the taste of a bed bug in his mouth. Not very pleasant. These bed bugs, I don't know how they knew it. Maybe they knew it by the smell. I don't know. Maybe because it was a common thing to land up in their mouth. I don't know. But a bed bug had a horrible taste, and it was a very distinctive taste. You knew what that taste was. So now he's eating truma, and he gets this taste in his mouth of a bed bug, which the commentaries say doesn't have to be a bed bug, but it means there is something about this grain that has developed a very foul taste. He started eating it, and all of a sudden this terrible taste developed in his mouth. Meaning there is something about this grain that there's something wrong with this grain. So he's got shroom in his mouth. Now he develops this terrible taste in his mouth. Some learn it's the actual bed bug taste. Some people say it's like a bed bug. But the point is he has this horrible taste now in his mouth that there's something now, a horrible taste in his mouth that he's now disgusted from eating the truma. Harei zeh yifleit. In all these cases, everybody agrees that you spit it out. So in the first cases, the explanation is that he was never permitted to actually eat this. And therefore, once he finds out that you're not allowed to eat it, he's got to spit it out. The last case is a very interesting case. What's exactly the explanation here? We're talking about are we talking about truma? Are we not? What are we talking about here? So we are talking about truma. And the point of the Mishnah is that you're eating truma. It's a mitzvah to eat truma. It is a prohibition to waste truma. So if you're eating truma and you just spit it out, That's wasting truma. Now here, why are you spitting it out? You're spitting it out because there is this horrible taste in your mouth. We're not even necessarily talking about that there's some kind of prohibition here. According to some, the point is there is a bed bug in your mouth. And you have to get that, and you have to and it's forbidden. And that would actually, okay. So either whatever, let me backtrack. The point of the Mishna here is that there is a foul taste in your mouth. It could be from the bed bug. It could be from something else. We're not dealing here with a situation where there's actually a prohibition to continue eating it necessarily. Meaning, it's brought down here, a bed bug is a forbidden creature, while a foul-tasting forbidden creature does not prohibit a permitted foodstuff into which it falls. In a case where the creature is whole or is not mixed into a permitted substance, it is forbidden to consume the foodstuff. Here, the foul taste indicates that there was a prohibited bug mixed in this person's mouth with the food. Since its taste is discernible, the person eating it must suspect that it can be separated from the food in his mouth, and he must therefore expel the entire contents of his mouth, even if he's eating truma, to avoid eating the prohibited creature. There's two ways of explaining this. One way of explaining it is there's no bed bug in his mouth. There's just this foul taste. And you might think that because there's this terrible taste, I shouldn't waste truma. It's a mitzvah to eat truma. I shouldn't waste truma. For the foul taste, I gotta finish it up. The answer is no, you don't have to. Once there's a foul taste in your mouth, you're disgusted with eating this, that is not considered wasting the truma. It's developed a horrible taste, you're allowed to spit it out, and there's no problem, and it's not forbidden to do. That's going to one explanation. The other explanation is that, if I understand it correctly, okay, the point is that now, according to the other explanation, the fact that he tastes the bed bug means there was a bed bug here. And if there was a bed bug here, so it's actually possible if the bed bug's not here anymore, it could be again, let's put it this way. If the bed bug fell in, and there's no taste, and it's not here anymore, or it got mixed in and you can't see it anymore, it became nullified. Right. Let me just read this again slowly in the other explanation. A bed bug is a forbidden creature, while a foul-tasting forbidden creature does not prohibit a permitted food into which it falls. Okay, just the fact that it fell in, and it, so to speak, we know when something forbidden falls into something permissible being cooked, it actually can give off taste, and that would now forbid the food. That's not an issue by a foul-tasting bug, because it's a foul taste. A foul taste doesn't forbid. However, in the case where the creature is whole or is not mixed into a permitted substance, it is forbidden to consume the foodstuff. Here, the foul taste indicates that there was a prohibited bug mixed into this person's mouth with the food. Okay? Since its taste is discernible, the person eating it must suspect that it can be separated from the food in his mouth. And he must therefore expel the entire contents of his mouth, even if he's eating truma, to avoid eating the prohibited creature. Basically, if he now tastes this bed bug, okay, he can discern it, then he has to suspect that maybe this bed bug is still in his mouth and he's got to get it out. And therefore, he now has to spit out everything, including the truma, in order to do that. So according to some, you can spit out the truma just because there's a foul taste here. According to the other explanation, that's not enough. It's got to be that there's a question of eating something prohibited. And being that when you discern the taste, that indicates the possibility that it could be separated from the food, the bed bug. Therefore, you have to spit out the whole contents of your mouth, even though you were eating truma, and that will be ruining the truma. Okay, so again, the Mishnah concludes with cases where either it was never permissible to start eating it, or this taste of the bug has developed in your mouth, and due to that, again, Rebbe Lezer will say you spit out the truma. You have to spit out the truma. Rebbe Lezer only argues that you can finish eating what you had once you started it in a permissible manner. Prohibition against straying after the thoughts of one's heart and what one sees. Shenamar, as it states, you shall not follow or stray after your heart or your eyes. What this means to say is, we should not bring a thought to our minds or start thinking a thought that causes us to uproot one of the main principles of our faith, or a thought to uproot one of the principles of our faith. I'm sorry. This means that we should not entertain in our heart any thought that can cause any one of the main principles of our faith to be uprooted. Okay, not to think about some kind of a thought that's considered what we call epicursis, heresy. To really think about a thought that could uproot a principle of one of the main principles of our belief system. That is something the Torah is warning us, prohibiting us from do. Why? Because once we start entertaining the thought, then the Satan, the Yetzer Hara, starts pushing us towards actually accepting it. Which should not follow what one's eye sees. But Zalaima meaning to say is nus, immorality. Our sages say, when it says don't stray after your hearts, that's referring to minus, which means heresy. And after your eyes means znus, means not to go looking at immoral things that could bring you to do that. Ubachlal is included in this. Not to think about and to think about and to pursue other pleasures of this world. Meaning other types of pleasures or desires that can take us away from serving Hashem. One has to be very careful of reprehensible thoughts, because this becomes a foundation. This is a foundation that everything depends on. One has to sanctify, purify his thoughts with all his efforts. And if he does come to some situation of physical pleasure, his thoughts should be, in order to have strength to stand, so to speak, in the sanctuary of the King, Malka Shel Olam, Baruch Hu, the King of the world, may he be blessed. That you're doing it not for the sake of just deriving pleasure, but for the sake of making sure that your body does not become weak and has the strength in order to serve Hashem. And one who transgresses this, and he brings to mind these reprehensible thoughts regarding our principles of our religion, of our belief system, chas v'shalom, or heinousness, or a thought of immorality, or to pursue, or to plan, to pursue after other types of physical gratification. This is something very serious, because it drives a person away from the world to come. Inappropriate thoughts contaminate one's entire being, both physical and spiritual. Therefore, a person has to be very careful of this. This applies in all places, at all times, both by men and by women. Have a wonderful day.